This is a manual focus lens and the aperture is fixed at f5.6. So you may wonder why people would want to buy a lens like this. I have been shooting with this lens over the last 2 weeks, so in this video I'm going to share with you the things I like and don't like about this lens. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a look at the 7 Artisans 35mm f5.6 pancake lens. This lens is available for the Leica M mount, L mount, Sony E mount and also Nikon Z mount. The sample I received is for the Nikon Z mount, but as far as I know, all the different versions are pretty much identical apart from the M mount that has a little focusing tab on the body. So even though I'm using a Nikon Z mount in this review, everything I'm going to talk about should apply to the other versions as well. This 7 Artisans lens is a very compact lens. The size of it is only a little bit bigger than a lens cap. So when I mount it onto my Nikon Z6, you will see the size of this lens is just lined up with the handle of the Nikon Z6. Now, one problem with a lot of those pancake or small size lenses, when you mount it on a body that has a big handle like the Nikon Z6, sometimes your fingers may be blocking part of the frame, but with this lens, because of the focal length is 35mm, so even if I hold the camera like this, or even if I move my finger a little bit, my fingers still wouldn't appear inside the frame. This is a full frame lens, but if you use it on a camera with an APS-C sensor, now the equivalent focal length would be around 50mm. This lens has a full metal construction and it feels very solid, and it is also a fully mechanical lens, so there is no electronic contacts, there's no autofocus or any other electronic features. We have the manual focus ring at the front of the lens. This is a lot better than a lot of other similar lenses in the market. A lot of them only has like a far focus and the near focus. For this one, you can adjust the focus continuously between 0.3 and infinity. And there is a soft click at the infinity setting, and if you turn it past that, then it would close the front lens cap for you. The focus throw is only around 15 degrees, so it's not a very long focus throw. And when I'm closing the lens cap, I can hear a little bit of noise. I think it's probably because the lens cap is rubbing a little bit against the lens itself. Overall, the focus ring feels pretty nice, but I do have some issues with it. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on in this video. And if you want to use this lens with a Nikon Z body, because the lens itself doesn't have any electronic contacts, so the Nikon Z's focus confirmation indicator wouldn't work when you are focusing with this lens, so you have to rely on either using peaking or using the magnification to zoom in to check the focus. In terms of the image quality, image sharpness is very good from center all the way to the corner. Look at this sample photo, you can see that it is very sharp from the center all the way to the edge and corner of the photo. There is a little bit of distortion, and the distortion doesn't seem to be very uniform, but if I bring this photo into Adobe Lightroom and apply a -6 distortion correction, then I can get rid of most of the distortion from the photo. In terms of lens flare control is actually very good with this lens when you are shooting objects at a far away distance. Even when I'm shooting directly into the sun, there is still very minimal amount of lens flare that is visible in the photo. However, as you change the focus distance to a closer focus distance, probably because the front element would now be moving forward and now would extrude a little bit in front of the lens. So quite often you will see a brighter area near the center of the frame because of the lens flare. Chromatic aberration seems to be very well controlled by this lens. Looking at all my sample photos, I don't really see much color fringing. I don't think many people will be buying this lens to shoot video, but if you are planning to do that, I would tell you that there is quite a bit of focus breathing with this lens. The field of view would decrease as you are changing the focus distance from infinity to close focus. The effect is pretty noticeable. because of the f5.6 aperture, usually you wouldn't be able to dissolve the background too much. But if you are shooting at the minimal focus distance, you can still dissolve the background a little bit, and the bokeh actually looks pretty pleasant. Okay, now you should have some idea about the picture quality of this 7 Artisan 35mm f5.6 lens. Over the last 2 weeks, I have been using this lens quite a lot. I carry it with me pretty much every day, so I use it to shoot a lot of different kind of photos, from photos of my children to some landscape photo, and I also do quite a bit of street photography using this lens. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts and impression about this lens when I shoot it in real life. There are some things I like and some things I don't really like about this lens. So let's start with the things that I like about this lens. Some of you will know that I love shooting with prime lens, and one of the big reasons is when shooting with a prime lens, my brain can lock on one focal length, and that kind of forces me to focus on the composition. And that is even more true with a lens like this one, because the aperture is f5.6 and it's fixed at 5.6, so I couldn't use the different aperture to change the depth of field, and I definitely could not easily dissolve the background as well. So that kind of forced me to focus on the composition, focus on looking at the light, and focus on the timing. So shooting only with a lens like this is a very good way to limit myself, but at the same time would force me to improve my photography. This 35mm f5.6 lens is actually also a very good lens for doing street photography using zone focusing. So what is zone focusing? Zone focusing means you would pre-focus your lens to a certain focus distance and you leave it like that in the manual focus mode. So any object that is at that distance away from you will be in focus without you needing to do any autofocus. And if you're shooting at a smaller aperture, for example with this lens which is f5.6, then you would have quite a bit of depth of field. So that means not only objects at that certain focus distance, but including objects that is quite a bit in front and behind of that focus distance will also be in focus. If you want to take a photo very quickly and your subject is at the distance that is very similar to your preset focus distance, you don't have to focus at all. You don't have to trigger autofocus. You just need to point the camera and then take a photo immediately. And that's why, even though these days a lot of cameras already have a very good, very advanced and very fast autofocus system, a lot of street photographers would still rely on zone focusing when they are doing street photos. And another good thing is, because the size of this lens is quite small and also it doesn't have a very large front element, so it doesn't attract a lot of attention when you are holding it on the street. So this makes it also a very good lens for doing street photography. So to me, it's a very fun lens for me to enjoy photography. It is very simple, effective, and the result is good enough. However, it is not a perfect lens and there are a few things that I don't really like, and let's talk about them now. Now, the first thing is, even though the focus ring has a soft click at the infinity focus distance, but I found that if I leave the focus ring at that position and take a landscape photo where the objects are far away, everything actually would be slightly out of focus. So I have to move the focus ring back slightly by about 2 marks on this focus scale. Now, then everything at the infinity focus distance will be in focus. So this is definitely a bit annoying because that means every time when I want to take a landscape photo, I have to move to the position that has a soft click and move back slightly, and also have to be very careful how much I move back. So I'm not too sure whether it's just a problem with the sample I have here, or maybe this is something to do with the set mount version. So if you also have this lens, no matter you are using the set mount version or the other mount version, please let me know whether you have this problem or not when you set to infinity focus distance, whether everything at infinity distance will be in focus or slightly out of focus. Now, the second thing I want to mention is, when I'm doing street photography, because most of the time the subject that I want to shoot would not be at infinity distance, so I have to set to infinity focus distance and move the focus ring back a little bit. So what I found is, for the photos that when my subject is maybe around 10 meter or slightly more than 10 meter away, I have to dial it back by around 3 marks on the focus scale. Or if I want to shoot some street photo where my subject is a little bit closer, maybe around 4-5 meter, then I have to dial it back by 4 marks on the focus scale. The focus throw of this lens is so narrow, it's only around 15 degree or so from the closest focus distance to infinity focus distance. So when you are adjusting the focus, you have to be very careful and very precise. So I definitely would prefer if the truffle throw is a lot bigger than what it currently is, so I don't have to be so careful when I'm adjusting the focus distance. And to make things slightly worse, because the front lens cap, if you want to close the front lens cap, what you have to do is to turn the focus ring past infinity, and then the front lens cap would just close. So that's a very clever design. But if you want to do street photography at a certain distance, and that means every time when you close the front lens cap, and then you have to carefully adjust the focus distance back to what you prefer. So that make it slightly worse, because you have to be very carefully adjust it every time after you close the front lens cap. To get around that, maybe you just don't close the front lens cap at all and just leave it at your preferred focus distance. Or maybe what you can do is, after you find what is your preferred focus distance, and you use something to mark on the lens, so maybe use some marker pen or put a sticker here so that you can easily visualize what is your preferred focus distance. So next time, if you want to move it back, it will be a lot quicker and also a lot more precise. And the last thing is, I would prefer if this is a f8 lens rather than a f5.6 lens, because right now f5.6, I couldn't really get a shadow depth of field anyway. I couldn't really dissolve the background unless I'm shooting some very close-up subject. So when I'm doing street photography, pretty much everything looks in focus, but sometimes it's slightly out of focus if when I'm doing zone focusing and the subject is slightly outside the depth of field that I thought would be in focus. Because most of the full frame camera in the market these days have a very good high ISO performance, so I would rather the lens has a slightly smaller aperture so I can get a little bit more depth of field, and that would make it easier for zone focusing. I think this 7 Artisan 35mm f5.6 lens is not a lens that is suitable for everyone. If you really care about image quality, then you would just be better off just stick with your kit lens, because your kit lens image quality would probably be just as good, if not slightly better, than this 7 Artisan 35mm f5.6 lens. But if you think photography is also about having fun and you would love to have a bit of challenge for yourself and help you to improve your photography, this $140 7 Artisan 35mm f5.6 pancake lens would be a pretty cheap investment, and it is a lot more fun shooting with this lens compared to most of the kit lens in the market.